to Jung at Harp. Today, we are going to talk about living your fullness, one note at a time. I'm Deborah Henson-Conant. I'm a composer and a performer, and I am here with Kathleen Wiley, who is a Jungian psychoanalyst. We both play the harp, and so we call this Jung at Harp. Kathleen, you were the one who suggested today that we talk about this, living your fullness one note at a time. And what made you suggest this for today?
Oh, wow. Well, they say that we best teach that which we need to learn. So I suppose there's something I'm needing to learn about this. I was thinking about that am working with the Sacred Circle with body awareness practices, embodiment practices, the first being body awareness. And I was thinking about you're getting ready to start the summer Harp Jam, which I've done before, and I'm working to clear time in my schedule to do again. And how in the summer Harp Jam, as you're teaching chord progressions, that, of course, the chord progression is tied to the root note. And that in order to really feel and experience the song, we have to be able to go at a pace where we experience that note and we can experience the movement and the emotion of that one note and then the next note. And I was thinking about it in terms of our bodies and all of what we experience throughout the day in terms of body sensations and all of those emotions and fleeting images and thoughts that come up in response to the body sensations, and how true it is if we're going to live the fullness of our life, just like if we're going to play the fullness of a song, we have to be able to slow down and tune into and experience each of those sensations and emotions. And the importance of the note, the one thing, the one body sensation, the one emotion, the one affect that's flowing through us, just like the one chord we're at in the song. So that was my circumambulating in my head.
Well, yeah, here are the things that it's making me think of. Here are the words that I wrote down while you were talking, which was foundation. So foundation, progression, movement, expression is what I thought of. Because when you were saying, so you're right, in Summer Harp Jam and in jazz. So Summer Harp Jam is like taking jazz improv and just taking it really tiny. And in it, we're working with chord progressions. So let me just take a really simple chord progression that is called let's see. 1, 6, 2, 5. That's that, and it's just called 1, 6, 2, 5 because it's based on the first note of a scale, the sixth note of a scale, the second, and then the fifth. And there's a fundamental, or I put foundation here, but I'm thinking fundamental. So I'm always working with people who are at multiple levels, meaning because this is my passion that by playing together in certain ways, everybody at every level can play together. And I'm passionate about this because it comes out of my childhood, because when I played music as a child, I was playing with adults who were far more adept than I, but I was given a part to play that was essential so I could actually have that essential part. So there was no feeling like, no, you have to be good enough. You have to wait and be good enough to play. That wasn't the essence. The essence was, the message was, everyone has a part. We just need to find the part that you can play now at your level. So part of the reason I love teaching this way and why I love what you're bringing, living your fullness one note at a time, is that when we get that one note, so if I say the progression is, I can't remember what I said, so I'm going to play the progression the way I might play it. It might sound like this: 1, 6, 2, 5, and I might actually alter that 5 so I can make it very rich. But what's really happening there is 1, 6, 2, 5. So that's something I literally could teach someone who's never touched a harp. I could say, play the red one, skip over one on the way down, then play the one just above the red one, then play the one just above the black one. And anybody could play with me. So if I was playing, even if I added a rhythm, I'm still playing 1 and then 6 and then 2 and 5. So even someone who couldn't play at all could still go, hey, I'm playing 1 and the 6, and then I'm playing the 2, and then I'm playing 5. And what we do when we learn so if we can get the foundation in that one note so that we're playing, we're not watching from the sidelines, but we're there, we're in it, then we can start expanding. So for example, if I was teaching and I'm trying to think about this in terms of my life, what's the fundamental of anything I'm doing, rather than get caught in all the details. I could get caught in all the details of like, well, this is a C major 7 chord, or I can say it's a 1 and it's the red one. Then you're with it, and then you can expand it. You can keep expanding it. You can alter it, but I'm still playing 1, 6, 2, 5. So I'm thinking about this again as in my life. And then I can even substitute things, and then I can change the rhythm, and then I can put it in a different key. But I'm starting with that fundamental single note, and I can always go back to that. And if I get lost, there's a progression, so I can get back on the progression. And so in Summer Harp Jam, I'm teaching this in these very tiny forms. And then in jazz, the form just gets bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger. So my question for you, and so this foundation, progression, movement, expression, ultimately, I get to the point where I can not only express myself with rhythm, but then I may come up with words like, what is fullness? How can I live the fullness of my life? One note at a time. Then I can take this very simple thing I started, and I can expand it to express and to explore and to experience all of my life. So I'm starting with that fundamental. All right, that's how I would do it with music. Now I ask you, Kathleen, how do I do the same thing with my life? How do I find the fundamental? How do I expand it? How do I have a progression? And then how do I express myself?
Well, there are lots of ways that I can answer that question, but I'm going to pick one. But before I do that, I want to go back to your story about growing up, because I think this is a fundamental and an essential operating principle for living into our fullness as a human being and as a musician, is that whatever you can do is essential and has a place. And how wonderful, what a gift of love your mother and stepfathers and the people that were in your family and, blood or by choice because of the adults gave you, that as a child, you had an essential part, even if it was the one note. And that belief, that operating principle, that intention, that whatever we want to call it, I think is foundational to living your fullness. And again, playing into your fullness as a musician. Whatever you can do is essential. So, for instance, if we take it to we're in a personal relationship, and all of a sudden the person we're talking to says something or does something, and we suddenly shut down. And maybe at this point we have no understanding of what's behind the shutdown. We don't really understand what that's linked to. We just know we've shut down. Then in that moment, if we can just say, I'm aware I've really shut down. And I don't have anything else to say right now. If we're with someone who's loving and can say, that's okay, we'll just be together in it, then it's amazing how that starts to free something up where one can begin to say, well, I shut down because I felt scared, because that tone of voice you use triggers in me this memory of my father when he would start with that tone of voice and 5 minutes later be hitting me. I mean, that could be one example. So you start with the foundation of the sensation and automatic reaction. Then you look at where that takes you in terms of the emotion it connects to, the images that come into your mind, and any memories that are associated with that. Then you can look at what is it you really were wanting to express in the current moment, as well as in that moment when the original shutdown came into place. Because at the moment that we've moved to be able to see, just like with the chord progressions, if I can see, and I don't just mean with my eyes, but I can see with my third eye internally. If I can see the 1, 6, 2, 5, then when I am in a moment where that I hear it, that resonates, I know where to go. If in the moment I shut down, I know the progression. I know this is tied to this, and this then leads to here. And I understand the movement of what happens internally. Then I can begin to be free to express in a different way in the moment, which is exactly what knowing the chord progressions, at least this is what it does for me. When I have those chord progressions, those patterns, and I can begin to hear it. And you know, I'm married to a wonderful folk musician who has this capacity to, even when we're in a jam, you know, he can give me the chord progressions of songs as they start to play them, which is really fantastic.
You mean a musical jam, right? Not a jam yes. in your life.
Right. No, a musical jam, yeah. Now, I help him out in the other jams.
Okay, got it.
It's a mutually beneficial relationship. But, you know, so knowing that movement. So what we have to do is we have to begin to study ourselves just like we study music. And, yeah, we have to give ourselves the same attention. And of course, one way to do that, well, we can talk about that in a minute. But
well, I want to go back to what you said about what I am actually doing. You know, what our intention is, and I'm thinking again. I'm thinking, and I think both of us are on two levels, which is music and life experience, life engagement. And I'm thinking about one of the things that's so powerful about a progression. And by the way, every jazz tune is a progression. It's just a very long progression. It's like 32 bars long. And what I do in Summer Harp Jam is make progressions 4 bars long so that it's easier to stay within that. And what I love about that is that it comes around again. Our intention, and I'm going to, as you were talking, I was thinking, oh, the progression is, in a sense, the 1, 6, 2, 5 is like our intention in this conversation. So if I get off the conversation by thinking about the past or having a twinge of resentment, or that I get triggered or something like that, I could spin off on there and get lost, or I can come back to the intention of that progression, which is we are together playing 1, 6, 2, 5. And it doesn't matter what happens, that intention is going to keep going. It creates a steadiness. And I think that what I was hearing in what you were saying, and in the question is, how do we live that fullness one note at a time? How do we do this in our lives? And what do we learn from music to help us do this? Mm-hmm. Is that I can have an intention. So my intention in a relationship is my intention in this conversation with you. I want to connect with you. I want to go back to that original conversation. I want to keep experiencing it and see where that conversation will go throughout my life. in these conversations with you. And so no matter what happens, if I get lost, I can always come back to that. And the same thing with anything I'm doing. If I know what my intention is in the moment, like if I'm writing a marketing email, the bane of my existence, and I'm like, oh, I better get some great language here, and then I can be like, no, what's your intention? To connect, to make sure that people know that I have something that I would like to give them. Then I can come back no matter how much I get lost. In my own life, if I, every morning I ask myself, why am I here? I'm here to step out of my darkness with a light that illuminates when in others. Mm-hmm. Whatever I'm an advocate for the human creative voice. If I can go back to that, then no matter when I get lost, that's my one note at a time. Yes. That's my progression. Yes. And I can come back to that, and then I can build off of that, but always that's the fundamental.
Yes. And you're saying something that is so true for living our fullness, both our creative fullness as an individual and our fullness as a human being in relationship to other people, is that what we all want more than anything is connection. I mean, Jung and others, psychoanalysts and other spiritual teachers have said this, that ultimately what it is that we all want is we want human connection. So that in this moment, we want human connection, and we have an intention of experiencing human connection this morning around this topic of living your fullness, one note at a time. And so that whatever else is going on inside of us, whatever other progressions we might get into and the movements that happen, we then come back to this expression of how does that inform us about our desire to have connection this morning around this topic. The same thing is true if we're having a personal interaction, and let's just say we all of a sudden we find ourselves angry. Well, anger often takes people into a progression and a movement where they actually cut off connection, and they attack the connection. And that is a defensive, unconscious survival response. And so seeing that happen is the first step to being able to say, I don't want to attack, because that's not what I want to do here. I don't want to destroy my connection with this person in the moment, except maybe in the impulsive moment when I do. But that's not my larger intention. And so the other thing about one note at a time is, as one of my analysts used to say, you don't want to hurt them until the moment you do. That's not my larger desire but there might be a moment where I'm so angry I want to hurt someone. If I can see and feel that note, then I don't have to act it out. If I can in the jam know 1-6-2-5 is what's going to fit with what they're playing, even though I have an urge to go off to 7 and back to 1, I can say I'm not going to do that because I want to be in harmony here. I want to have a fit here. I mean, there's a time for the other also.
Right. I hear you. Yeah. So you would have to be in agreement or in communication or connection with people and say, hey, at this point, at this signal, we're going to go off to this progression. I see we're getting some comments, which I really want to get to. Good. And I also want to just kind of point out that what I hear you saying is the ability to be listening at the same time that we're playing. Yes. To be listening to the deeper connection that we're making at the same, so that we are responding and not just a kind of off on our own, in our own little thing. And I also love this, and I'm wondering, Sarah, if you can bring this up. The word artist is saying, and I really love this, I dance as I play, and I have a different steps for each part of the progression. And I love that. I remember when I was first learning to do the blues, I made a blues dance. And I love that because you're talking about integrating that and in living the fullness of one note, what I hear you saying is that you're taking one note of music or one progression, and then you're consciously putting it in your whole body. So you've got complete resonance with it. You're engaging full resonance, which creative resonance is like my thing. Kathleen, do you want to say anything about that?
Yeah, well, I think again, playing, and I think of dancing as a play, and sometimes the physical movement helps us to dissipate whatever somatic component is activated with a strong emotion. So again, if for instance, all of a sudden I'm interacting with my partner and my anger gets triggered, and I realize my anger's triggered, and I've gone from 0 to 120 in a nanosecond, then if I can catch that, I might say to him, you know what, I just need to go to the bathroom. And I just move. I just change my physical state of being. And when we do that, something shifts for us. And then we're able to have a different progression and a different movement and a different expression. And I think the dancing, and as you play with each part of the progression, allows that too with music.
Yeah, and I'm really loving what the word artist is saying. Coming back to this, living into your fullness. One, I'm hearing some sound. Oh well, okay. I'm living into our fullness, one note at a time. What I'm hearing there is expanding into another modality to understand at a deeper level, and actually taking another physical modality that in this case we may or may not be more comfortable with. Like it's possible that the word artist is more comfortable with moving, and then we teach. Like if I teach people, if I say this is 1-6-2-5, it goes like this: bum, 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 and we go bum and bum up, bum, bum, bum. Once people do that, it starts to get into our bodies. And then maybe we can put it in our voices, and then maybe we can experience how our feet can move. Our feet can be moving in that progression while we understand that our hand, the melody may be different. And so I feel like part of what I love about what word artist said is that we're expanding in a greater understanding into our whole selves from one little thing, which means that any one little thing, any one little note or one little idea could expand to who knows where by exploring it in different modalities: physical modality, writing, singing, drawing, whatever it is. And I'm realizing that this is again answering my question: is what's the fundamental? And I may not have an exact answer for that, but what's the fundamental of this? And then what are all the different ways to expand, alter, substitute? And this is another beautiful way to do it through different modalities.
Right. It made me think about, as you were talking, that, in terms of our own living experience, the different modalities could be equated to our own the different worlds or planes that we live on. So there's our physical body, then there's our emotional body, our automatic responses, then there's our mental body with our beliefs and ideas and images and how they connect to our desires and longings. And then there's our spiritual body that is kind of the full essence of who we are. And that if we're stuck in one modality, i.e., I'm stuck in my head with the 1-6-2-5, if I then shift to my physical modality and experience it like you were doing and sing it and feel the vibration, then it shifts. So this is why, in terms of living into one's fullness, and let's just say breaking out of call a negative feedback loop, a negative progression, meaning a progression that we know severs the connection to self and other.
Or one that gets stuck and never moves to the next note.
When it gets stuck and never moves. When we can use tools to conjure up the feeling in our body of what we want. So for instance, you know, when I'm with my partner whom I know loves me and really does want my highest good, if I have a moment of feeling hurt and I've gone into my anger, that I can, if I've held on to consciously, okay, I know that when this happens, this is how it gets resolved. That's not what he intends. I can begin to help myself shift into a different modality, a different felt experience. And that different felt experience is part of what allows us to live our fullness. It's like when people get anxious, yeah, anxiety is a normal part of the human condition. The only time we stop feeling anxious at some point is when we're dead, and I'm not really sure it happens then, because I think evolution goes on. But we're more than our anxiety, and that's part of the key to living our fullness. Is we are more than any one body sensation or emotional state or belief or idea or image we are holding in our mind's eye and in our body mind at any given time.
You know, I'm having this total revelation, which it would be great to talk about sometime, about the word modes and modality. And so one of the things that's so powerful about the harp and why it's so rich is that all the modes are actually being resonated at the same time. And as you were talking about the body, I was like, oh my God, that's what a modality is. It's like there are all these things that are there and you're just focusing, you've made one, to play in a different mode on the harp, you don't play any different notes. The notes are all the same, but you use a different one as your fundamental. And so that's what, when you were talking, I was like, oh my God, we're like harps. This is pretty good. This must be pretty good coffee this morning. Like I'm a harp and I've got all these different strings that are resonating and I can use any one as the foundation that I'm looking at. And that's going to resonate the other things in different ways. So now what I'm hearing you say is, first of all, now I want to get really aware of what those modalities are. It sounds like there's a physical modality, there's an intellectual modality, there's a spiritual modality. I don't know. Is there a list of modalities somewhere? I have no idea. I mean, you just rattled them off.
Well, what I was referencing are, I think of like the 4 planes that we live on, or the 4 worlds in which we live. Some energy people talk about it as bodies, you know, that we have a physical body, we have an emotional body, we have a mental body. That's one way to think about it. The other thing I want to say is that within each of those modalities, or encompassing all of them, those modalities, we then have what Jung called the complexes, which are the feedback loops that are the building block of psyche. And so there are different ways to think about the human psyche and modalities. And for right now, for purposes of our conversation, probably the most understandable is thinking in the 4 worlds. But I also want to add, each of us have to learn about our own complexes. We have to learn, what are these building blocks? What are these feedback loops that I know are part of my operating system? And Jung says, he says, we can have a generic blueprint for the human psyche, but that every psyche needs its own individual manual. This is sometimes what I say to people. We do an analysis, is we are fleshing out, we're making conscious your manual, where we are looking to understand what is your unique operating system. And yes, it has generic templates, just like our skeleton is a template, but each of us is also very different. So
Well, so now I'm, and sorry, I thought I didn't have my computer plugged in and I got distracted for a minute. So now I'm imagining that each of us is a different song, you know, because if there is a fundamental blueprint,
yes,
and yet each of us is a completely different expression of that. And we may be a completely, and we're an evolving expression of that.
yes.
I mean, I don't even know where I'm going with this, Kathleen. Help me out.
Well, but I think where you're going is what you teach all throughout the Hip Harp Academy, which is that the essential you are comes through in the essential you can do in this moment. And let yourself do what you can do in this moment so that the essential you are can come out and be expressed in the world. And I do think we do each have our own, we are each a unique song. I think of it as we're each an individual ray of the sun. We all are connected to the larger sun, but we each are one of those rays that you sometimes can see coming down from the sky. And that our work is when I say our work, our play, for me, the whole goal of being human, of living, is to express the most fully and beautifully and whole, W-H-O-L-L-Y, and holy, H-O-L-E-Y, both, that essence. And that so much is, I think, the heart of what makes someone a true musician versus someone who just plays a musical instrument. I mean, I think about you saying, Miles Davis saying it takes a long time to sound like yourself, to play music like yourself. I think that's what he was getting at, that, you know, we can learn and we can show up and we can join in and play the song, but where is it we play the song our way?
You know, Tony, my teacher, Tony Montanaro, who was a mime, he talked about what we do on stage, what we think we're doing on stage, is actually just to keep us occupied while the audience gets to see who we are.
Mm-hmm.
And I know for sure that many of us, me especially, well, or whatever, me also, will use ability, learn something fancy to, in order to hide. I think that I'm expressing more, which I may be, but I'm also kind of hiding. It's almost like taking this beautiful, I don't know. It's like I'm dressing my soul up in fancy clothes to try to make it something that I think it needs to be, when in fact, what I see in the academy is people who have incredible life experience, bringing their life experience, falling in love with the harp, and then thinking that they need to have a certain level of technical expertise before they can express themselves with the instrument, when in fact the instrument can be a beautiful platform, even in its simplest way. And word artists mentioned this by saying, I dance as I play. Mm-hmm. So in the simplest way, if I've been telling stories all my life, I can use a single note to tell a story. Mm-hmm. All I need is that single note. It's very easy. Or if I'm a dancer, I can take something very simple and I can start to express, or poetry. Mm-hmm. I could express poetry even without even being able to play. I could use the harp in a coloristic way that requires almost no technical ability to enhance and color what I'm saying. And yet I find that many people are resistant to doing that because we feel like, well, I'm not really playing. And yet we are, if we would allow ourselves, and I struggle with this myself. I can see it in music. I can see it in students. I can help them, but I can't help myself. If we could see it, we could express ourselves, and then the technical ability, we add it little by little, but we don't have to wait. We don't have to wait to stop being who we are. We can live our fullness, even a single note, even with a single note.
And that goes back to what you shared you got in childhood, is that belief that no matter what you do, what you can do is essential, that one note is essential. And I think what happens to us in our life is we grow up and we get feedback as if what we do in that moment, that is what we can do in that moment, isn't good enough. So then we quit trying. And then when we quit, when we quit expressing, then we never develop skill or virtuosity.
Right.
And so that somewhere we have to quit dismissing the value of that one thing we can do or know.
This is really, thanks so much, Sarah, for bringing that up. Extended technique and virtuosity are like spice. When you add those to something that is already full and heartfelt, they enhance. But they can't add anything if you're not starting with something real. And I love that, because I'm thinking about my spices and like, could I make a meal out of the spice? I don't think so. It just wouldn't have the heart. It wouldn't have the fundamental.
That's right. So going back to that, the fundamental of expression that is essential, and that whatever you can do in that moment that joins in the connection has value. And so we have to begin to reclaim the value, even again, of saying, I'm shut down. I can't continue this conversation. And hopefully we were with someone loving who says, well, take space and I'll be here. I'll be here when you can talk. That so often we don't get that. What we get is a berating by someone who's caught in their own negative movement, progression, and complex.
Right. And that person is often in my head.
Yes. Yeah. But if we can begin to give ourselves okay, this is where I am now. It's amazing the power of unconditional presence to help free up something that's stuck. And I see this in my own harp playing, that when I can sit down and let myself be centered and come back into me and what I want to experience with the harp and what my intention is for playing, then something very different happens when I put my hands on the strings than if I sit down and I'm all worried because 3 people are in my living room and they're all professional musicians and I'm not going to be able to get this right. And I know I'm going to miss the strings and blah, blah, blah. And so we have to come back to that, internally come back to that intention, and that fundamental, that what matters most is connection, and the connection to self that allows expression of whatever it is I can do in the moment. And that will lead to connection with other.
I love this so much. And the last thing you said made me realize so you said the unconditional presence in the foundation. And then I said, and keep repeating, the beauty of the progression is that we get to keep going around it. And then what I heard you say right at the end, and I think is just so powerful, and that anybody can use this with music, but we could use it with anything, is that unconditional presence with what is, and then expressing that in a way of presence, not in a way of reactivity, not in a way of, but really in a way that where we allow ourselves to be heard by ourselves. And I think this is one of the most powerful uses of music. And a friend of mine said yesterday, and I wish I had the exact quote, but it was like, the arts turns anger to empathy. By translating something into art, we take one expression in which we're trying to, manipulate somebody else or trying to get somebody else to react into an expression of human experience. And what I love to kind of bring this all together for me is that when we take a simple musical form, like a progression, whatever the progression is, or even if it's just a single note, or just a single chord, a single chord that I love, to be able to take that and add unconditional presence, and then speak what's actually happening to me either with words or with movement or with the notes, that is how I can live into. And it's so interesting. It's not living out of my fullness, but it is like living into my fullness, one note at a time. I feel like you this conversation with the word artist and with Kathleen and with JT has answered that question for me today. And that's what I'm going to do, is to take a simple progression and look at the modality of it and, experience my modalities through that and play around with it.
Yes. Yeah. And the one thing that I'm going to really hold on to from our conversation today is that the simplest thing, or whatever I can do in the moment, is essential. And that the people I want to connect with value that. And that holding on to that one note is essential. And that I want to play music and I want to be in relationship to people who value that. And that's my big takeaway for today.
Well, now you've given me another takeaway, which is, what is the simplest way I can express love in this moment? Can it be through the sound of my voice? Can it be through my eyes? Can it be through my hands? What can it be? And that's the one note for me.
And my current, I say, I hope I keep evolving so this changes. But my definition of love is compassionate presence, which is, to me, very much synonymous with unconditional presence. And I think when we can bring that to whatever goes on inside of us, then we can live fully.
Well, thank you. Thank you so much. And thank you, Kathleen, for this conversation. Thank you to everyone who is listening, and also to JT and the Word Artist for engaging with us. And thank you to our new producer, Sarah, for being here and helping us be able to have unconditional presence. And I hope that you will be able to join us again next week. And so I would like to say farewell and thank you, Kathleen, again for a wonderful conversation.
You're welcome.